Welcome to After Hours presented by Afternoon Analytics. I'm your host, Ryan Hain, and I'm joined by co-founder Austin Streitmatter. Austin is a recent hire of the Minnesota Vikings as a data and analytics associate. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about entering the sports business after college and the advice Austin can offer. Whether you're a student looking to break into the industry or a seasoned professional looking to stay ahead of the curve, this episode is for you. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into After Hours. So, Austin, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So my first question today is, could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the field of data analytics in sports?
Yeah, so starting background, I have to tell you a little bit about my life before becoming a student. I grew up with an older brother and a younger brother, and we played sports pretty much all the time and everything that we could do. Um, and then in 2011, in 2009 to 2011, had some medical stuff that sort of pushed me off the field, and sort of fell in love with support side, I guess you would call it, of sports.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of pushed me back into. I've always been a math and numbers guy, and so that was awesome. And so didn't really do anything with that. Just was a basic math nerd throughout all of high school. And then sort of senior year figured out that the sports analytics field was becoming a thing, whether that was performance or what I'm doing, which is more business side. So sort of discovered that was a thing. Led me to Stanford University, which is where I am now. I graduated from in April, but sort of the combination of something I loved in sports, something else I loved in math, and sort of figuring out problems and problem solving coming together is how I found sports analytics and where I am today.
Yeah, and was there like an exact moment where you knew, uh, like this is the field for me?
I would like to say that there was, but there probably wasn't. It was more so just I sat in front of my TV a lot as a child because that's what I did. But just watched a lot of sports, and the stats were always something super interesting to me. And so being able to sort of be involved in that and learn from people and learn from others about what is
Mhm.
data, how does it dictate us? We all produce data every day, whether we want to or not, and it's real stuff. So that sort of was when I figured it out, but I wouldn't say it was a moment.
Yeah. Okay. Well, our next question is, how do you see the role of data analytics in sports evolving in the coming years?
Yeah, so I think that we're sort of, I don't want to say we're behind the curve, but there's sort of been the data revolution since we've been in college over the past 4 or 5 years, where teams are starting to understand the importance of using their data, analyzing their data, knowing that it's being created, and if they're not, they're falling behind. And so I think that people, especially in sports, but sort of in every aspect of business, are beginning to understand the need for some data guy because I
Hmm.
know that I'm not the best salesperson, and I know that some salespeople I've worked with are not the best data people. But when you sort of combine the two, and this is a really basic example, but when you give a salesperson a really good data guy, and when you give a data guy a really good salesperson, you make a lot of money just in that the salesperson gets better information to give to their clients, and the data person is able to work better with the data that is being produced from more clients and is doing their job
Hmm.
well without having the extra need to work on sales pitches and work on figuring out clients and prospecting and the things that come with being a salesperson.
Yeah. I think kind of a good segue into this next question would be, so, like, what are the most important skills for someone working in data analytics in sports to have? Like, what are things that you may have seen in yourself or like in your colleagues?
Yeah, so this is gonna be a basic answer. I apologize to anyone listening, but it's the truth is that you have to be able to solve problems creatively. Um, That's the number one thing. It doesn't matter how skilled you are at a certain program or how skilled you are at making a visual or a graph. If you can't creatively solve a problem or get from point A to point B, you're gonna fail. Just because data comes in all different ways, sourcing is different, flow is different. Um, just the data itself is different. And with my team at Stanford, we work with so many different kinds of data, from heart rate data to actual game data like points per game, um, to like force produced in the weight room. That's all so different. And so being able to sort of effectively and creatively figure out how does this all group together is crucial. And then probably the second most important, I think, is you have to be a really strong communicator. We
Mm-hmm.
often sort of put data people or spreadsheet nerds is a self-titled name, um, in this bubble of being people who like want to hide and like never talk to anyone. And while at times that may be true because I do enjoy working till the wee hours in the morning because I don't talk to anyone, um, like the best data people are excellent communicators because we know that we're
Mm-hmm.
talking to people who don't understand the data in and out like we do. And if I walked into a meeting and started presenting this project I've been working on in my spare time about consumer profiles of people who are visiting Stanford games to someone who doesn't understand anything what I'm talking about, I've lost all my credibility. It's just completely gone out the window. It doesn't matter if I'm one of the best data analysts in the country. Like, if they don't know what I'm talking about, it's pointless because
Mm-hmm.
the insights that are in my brain are not going to theirs, and that's a problem. And so I think probably looking at creative problem solving to figure out how to get from point A to point B, and then how to get from point A to point B when you have a block in the middle is crucial. But then also being able to communicate thought process, communicate insight, talk with the people who you're working with to mind meld thoughts, but also sort of understand what your end user wants the most is critically important.
Yeah. Are there any like tips and tricks you've picked up in your young career that have helped you become a better communicator?
Um, I think the number one thing is you gotta just talk to different people. So as you know, and as you can imagine as a listener, like as a college student, you go through 4 years of classes, all different classes, many different people and different professors. I've had a repeat professor 3 times during my time at Stanford total. And so it's, or four actually, sorry. But like that's four classes total over my 4 years here that I've had the same professor. So you're learning how to communicate differently with different professors, different
Mm-hmm.
materials, and then looking at like peer to peer, you have classes with different people. And like, yes, it's a small business school. I'm going to have the same classes with the same people. But I mean,
Yeah.
like, we still have different majors, different ways of communication. You and I talk very differently. Myself and my friends communicate differently. And then, like, I know people who are over in the health science building, when they talk their health science language, it sounds like French. But I know that, like, at the same point, that's the same thing as like me talking about sitting at home writing a script for a project I'm working on. They don't know what I'm talking about. And so like even just talking about like, hey, what are you doing today? Oh, I'm writing this code for this project, and then sort of diving into like what does that look like with someone who doesn't speak that language on a peer-to-peer
Mm-hmm.
level helps you practice that communication, and then just basically talking to anyone and everyone, whether they're above you, beside you, or below you, really has helped me at this point.
Yeah, no, that's great. Something else, kind of still under this vein of communication is something you kind of mentioned earlier, and like is kind of um, a thing with data analytics. Is kind of you have like the old kind of school of thought with traditional like scouting methods, but then you
Hmm.
also have like the Moneyball crowd. I think I know which one you align with more, but what would you say is something you've kind of seen as someone who's like in Gen Z, um, to kind of use that as a strength, like to communicate to maybe some older generations about data, and like how do you see? that kind of like evolving of your career, like again, like being Gen Z and like dealing with whenever the younger generation comes of age, and then millennials, Gen X, and beyond. So
Yeah, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, you're talking
yeah,
about
sorry, it
sort
was a
of
lot.
like how, very good, sort of how like old school thought mixes with new school thought, and how do
Hmm.
you communicate to people who don't really want to listen to what you have to say, is what I think you're
Yeah,
sort of asking. So I think first and foremost, um, like you have to understand that you're going to be rejected, and people aren't going to
yeah,
listen to you. And so, it's understanding that like when I came into Project Samson here at Sanford, which is our sports performance initiative to use data analytics to improve our athletes, um, I was some random sophomore from Tampa who none of these coaches had ever seen or heard of. And
yeah.
so I was lucky that they really were sort of wanting data, wanting people to do it, and just didn't know how to do it. So that became a plus. But it was sort of the idea of like you have to build, as your dad talks about all the time, like you have to build relational credibility before you can start pushing ideas. And so that
Hmm.
meant I'd go sit in the weight room for 9 hours a week because I needed to be friends with the people that I was talking to, some didn't even have a chance to listen to me because I knew that if
Yeah.
I was able to do that first, then when I come to bring a new point or a new idea, they'd understand, they listen better. And it's come to the point now where I don't want to say I have full range because I don't, but I'll walk into the weight room and say, hey, it's the project I'm thinking about. And the coach goes, I'm thinking the same thing, we're on the same page, let's go. And that happens in five
Hmm.
minutes instead of, a long time. And so when you look at sort of old school versus new school combining, like there's aspects of the old school that like aren't gonna go. Like you look at baseball, we talk about the whole like Moneyball, like he gets on base style of thought,
Yeah.
which is like true. Like you get on base, like nobody leads to more wins, but like we've also sort of figured out that like if you hit home runs, you also win games. And so it's where you
Yeah.
find the mix of like the old school, like get people on base is great because like you get a chance to score more runs. But if you combine getting people on base and hitting home runs, well, now you have this lethal combo of instead of having a 1 run home run, you have potentially 2 or 3 run home run as you people getting on base before you have your big hitters come up. And so,
Hmm.
wow, I don't think new school should absolutely, and do not hear me say new school should take over old school. I think it's the integration of the two styles of thoughts that becomes crucial. Like, I mean, we've seen the death of the running back in the NFL over the past 10-ish years, where in 2005, 6, and 7, you'd see Sean Alexander with 300 plus carries over 3 years, like 300 each year.
Hmm.
And then this year, you have like Jonathan Taylor who's been hurt, but like last year, I don't know if he even broke 250. Um, but it's the point that like, the positions change over time as people change over time, and so new school normally comes from people who've been watching the current state of the game. Um, and while they're not coaching, like for me, there's no pressure to fail when I'm watching a game. I can
Hmm.
test a theory and go try and figure it out. And like, I'm not coaching now. I could get fired, but like, as a senior in college, I can watch a college football game, see what happened, and I'm like, oh, this team passed for more yards than these guys. Like, they did it on fewer attempts. How does that dictate a game? And I go look at that, test that theory. Like, no one's gonna walk up to me and go, you tested this theory, you're fired. So like there's
Hmm.
more freedom to sort of expand on the wild ideas of maybe this will work, maybe this will work when you're not in the
Yeah.
job that the old school style of thought doesn't have because like they could be fired right there. But you can't really be
Yeah.
fired from a job you don't have as a college student. So
You're just making me think of Moneyball plot lines, but it was a great answer. Um, so, what advice would you give to someone looking to break into the sports business, particularly in the area of data analytics? You've already given a lot of great advice, but like, kind of that specific, like someone who may be like a freshman entering college, or someone who's for the first time really considering working in sports. Like, what advice would you give someone like that?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, like I was a freshman one time. I was someone looking to break into the sports industry. And for most people in the sports industry, they also were in your shoes at one point. Some are a little bit more removed than like, you know, graduating last year. Like I interviewed with associates at the Vikings program and they were like 1 year out of college. So they were
Mm-hmm.
literally in my shoes last year. Um, and then, there's other people in other jobs that I applied for who were a little bit more, had more experience in the field. And so it's sort of remembering that like people are there who've been in your shoes. No one really comes into the sports world having never wanted to do anything with sports in their life. Like that doesn't happen. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's sort of the idea of like don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to talk to someone. Reach out to someone on LinkedIn. Say, hey, what's going on here? Like get connected, which sounds scary, but like people were in your shoes at one point and look at where they are now. They're most of the
Mm-hmm.
time they're willing to help you, even if it's just, hey, I'm not the right person for this. Talk to this person about it. I think. Oh, I gotta remember this part because I just had it in my head. Oh, secondly, and this is sort of a harsh one, like you're not going to get a job in sports because you like sports and you played sports your whole life.
Yep.
Like that's not how that works. The only way that really works is if you're like a top athlete, and then you're an athlete. You're not working in sports really. Um, so you sort of have to find your niche and what makes you great. I'm a data guy. That's my niche. So when I go into interviews and they say, why do you want to work in sports? My answer is not because I love sports, because that's
Yeah, a
every
lot of
single
people like
person is trying to
sports.
get into the sports industry. Yeah, like that. My dad likes sports. He's not in the sports industry. Older brother likes sports. He's not in the sports industry. My younger brother does as well. Like people like sports. That, with all due respect, that does not make you unique. It just doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So find out what about sports interests you. For me, it is absolutely absurd. And like I've seen this especially in your life, as you know, the Falcons have had some ups and downs lately, and you've seen it in mine with the Lightning winning 2 Stanley Cups during my time in college. Like we get emotionally attached to teams that we have no reason to be attached to. Like
Yeah.
yes, the Lightning play in my hometown, but probably one of the best days of my life has been when we won the Stanley Cup and I was in the building for it. Like that was awesome. And I know for you, like one of the best days was like watching the Braves win the World Series. But like the other end
Mm-hmm.
of that spectrum is you have moments where like the Bucks probably should have won the Super Bowl 2 years ago when the Rams won it, and we blew a coverage to Cooper Cup that gave up a game-winning field goal, and then the Rams won the Super Bowl. So like we were one play away from probably winning the Super Bowl. That sucks.
Yeah,
That
well, you don't really
hurts.
need
Like
to
I
lecture a
was
Falcons
sad.
fan on that, but
Yeah, but like, I mean, you even see it like with the way that I
yeah,
follow like Indiana basketball. Like I'm having a bad day if Indiana loses, and I'm having a really good
yeah.
day when they win. And so like I mean, when we lost to Miami, I was the first time. I was very upset. That was a terrible day. So
Mm-hmm.
like for me, getting back to the question, because I could ramble about this for probably the next 2.5 hours. Like for me, it's the anomaly that sports is that brings people together who have no reason to ever know each other and no reason to ever see each other again, brings them together to create a unique experience. We had like go to a
Mm-hmm.
Lightning game, you sit this close to someone, um, and then you score a goal, you turn around and high five them. I had no idea who the person I just high fived is, but like I feel totally okay high fiving that person because we just scored a goal. Like you're not gonna walk down the street and
Yeah.
high five some random person just because you feel happy. Like that, like that's the anomaly of sports. So for me, that's why I want to work in sports. That's what makes me unique. It's sort of figuring out how do you create those moments for people that are tied to such emotion that sports brings. I think a third piece of advice, if I'm allowed to keep going here, you can cut me off
Yeah,
if I'm
no, keep
not,
going, please.
um, is like the sports world doesn't come to you. You kind of have to go get it. And so that means like if you want to hone a skill, like I wanted to hone my spreadsheet skills and then my R skills. And I was like, screw it, I'm gonna make an NFL betting model. Did I know what I was doing? No, not a clue. Did not know what the heck was going on. I was like, well, I know somewhat about football. Like we can do this. And so I looked on the internet about stuff, read about stuff, and then started doing it in Excel, pulling VLOOKUP formulas, pulling matching names, pulling stuff like this, where I was working on my skills through a project that I loved. So it didn't feel like work.
Mm-hmm.
Then we convert that to R, and I completely changed it. That happened to be for a school project, but I would have done it anyways because like that was
Yeah,
an opportunity where I knew what I needed to do to get the job done. And so, like going back to my first point, anytime I had a question, someone else had encountered that problem on Google already. Like anytime I
yeah,
had any issue, it's just the hardest part. I tell people this all the time. The hardest part of learning spreadsheets is how do I get the question that's up here onto words so Google gives me the right answer back. Like
yeah,
just find a project you love, go do it, and if you like, you're not going to know everything. We talk about this. I guess is point four. Is like the learning curve of life goes up and then comes back down and then goes back up, where you know nothing, you think you know a whole lot, you begin to realize what you don't know, and then you start to like learn more stuff and become like competent. And so like you're going to be discouraged. There's going to be moments where you go, I'm not qualified for this. When I apply, I'll tell you the story of how I applied for this Vikings job really quick. I was laying in bed,
yeah.
bored, scrolling on LinkedIn, found the job, and was like, well, I guess I'll apply this. This would be cool. I applied to it, and I was like, well, I don't meet any of these qualifications because I thought I did it because they wanted stuff. And I was like, this is not me, but I'm going to apply to it and just see what happens. And then they sent me an email that said, hey, we want you to answer these questions to come back to the first round. And I was like, okay, this is a funny joke. Like, oh, this is 3 pages of questions. Like, I don't have to, like, I gotta find time for this. And I kept putting it off because I didn't think I was going to get the job. And then I answered the questions and they emailed me back and said, hey, we want you to come in for a phone interview. I was like, all right, like, that likes me a little bit at least. I might have a shot here. Went in for the
Mm-hmm.
phone interview, prepped for that as I normally would. Thought I did okay and thought, oh, at least I have some interview practice. This is the end of the road. Like, it was fun while it lasted. And then they emailed me and said they wanted to have another interview. And so I interviewed again and thought, oh, this will be more interview practice. This is a group interview. I've never done one of those. Like, maybe I'll get the job. Left that interview feeling pretty good about where I stood. And then, like, 2 days later, I was waiting for the phone call, and like you were sitting next to me on the couch when they called. And I picked up the phone, and in my head, I was like, ah, gonna have to call my parents and tell them that I didn't get the job. And then I got the job. So no, at
Yeah.
no point in the entire process was I like, I feel confident about where I am. And that might just be a
Mm-hmm.
me thing, but like, you're coming out of college, you're not going to know everything. That's why you're coming out of college. Like, you're not going to have 4 years of experience. You're not going to have a
Yeah.
master's or a PhD in fields. Like, they, the sports teams, sports properties know that. They're not looking for you to be perfect. They're looking for you to come in and do your job and do it well. And the Vikings saw
Mm-hmm.
something in me that I guess I didn't see in myself, but I do now because now they've given me an absurd amount of confidence. Um, but it's for the idea of like, you're going to get knocked down, you're going to have projects that like don't work. My first NFL model predicted at a 40% success rate, which is worse than flipping a coin. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh well, you can either pout about it or you can sort of dive into the problem solving as we talked about and figure out what happened and try and make it better. So I think that's
Yeah.
probably the 4 or 5 points I would give as advice. And that was a really long-winded answer, but I'm passionate about this. So
No, it was a great answer. Well, that's all we have for today. I appreciate it again, Austin. Thanks for joining me, giving great answers.
of course,
And
happily.
we will see you soon. Thanks for listening to After Hours.
Thanks.